John Shannon is the former executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada, his podcast 100% Hockey. He is also the most famous man from Oliver, British Columbia, who goes back with the Vancouver Canucks through the entirety of their NHL existence in 1970.
Oof.
And John,
you've seen the losing.
you might be amongst the most qualified to answer. Is this the lowest points for this franchise?
I'm going to say no, but it's pretty darn close. I think that when you look at events that went on, I remember going to the Coliseum. Gosh, boys, 8,200 people. It was not a friendly place to go to. Tickets were easy to come by. I would suggest this might be the lowest since they moved downtown.
Do you think at the end of the season we're going to hear, some people will call them excuses, certainly, but are we going to hear about the Miller-Pettersson thing and about how Hughes wanted out and that there was no way to avoid this precipitous fall from grace?
No, I don't. But that doesn't mean it won't be talked about. I think at a certain point, people would be tired of hearing that. And then really, in the end, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it that matters.
Yep.
And so from that perspective, I think that this ownership / management group is trying to salvage something at this point. They understand, I think, what's gone on, why it's gone on, and now you've got to find a way to rectify it. I mean, the Quinn Hughes situation, with the three bodies they were able to get plus a first-round pick, it wasn't going to be an overnight remedy, but at the same time, hopefully Rossi, Ogren, are three warm bodies that can help your roster at some point. None of them are Quinn Hughes, but you weren't. And Quinn Hughes' time had grown here. It was done. You could see it on him. You could see it on the team. So they had to do something, and they did it quickly. That's what they did. They did it quickly and got, I think, pretty fair return for the defender. So
at worst, a reasonable haul. The question now is, I think there are some fans of the outright fans of the deal, and I think the pessimists would probably just call it fair or reasonable at best, but it's somewhere in there. But especially for those fans that really liked it, I think there's a lot of Canuck fans that are being maybe misled. I don't know what the word is, led to believe that there are more deals like that for the rest of the players that will leave. And I'm a little more cautious, John, based on what I see in the market, that whatever deals that they have left up their sleeve, I mean, I think people should be a little bit more modest in what they expect back.
Oh, yeah, listen, I think they hit a home run with the Hughes deal, and if that means they've put the bar that high for what they're supposed to get on every trade, then that's going to be those are tough expectations to match. I don't think there's any question about that. But they're gonna try to improve the club every which way they can now, and would listen to, I think, something on absolutely everyone.
Well, the big trade, John, Kiefer Sherwood off to the San Jose Sharks for 2 second-round picks and a depth defenseman. How do you like the move for Vancouver?
Well, it obviously happened a lot quicker than most people realize as soon as the Canucks changed their demand. I mean, they had been asking for a first-round pick, and they changed it to getting a second-round pick. In fact, got 2 picks out of the Sharks. Clayton, who is a guy that came out of the Columbus system, was playing in the American League for the Sharks. I'm not sure what the upside of him is. That he's been a minor leaguer for 5 or 6 years, guys. So I don't think we really know what aspect he will be in all of this. But if you look at the 2 second-round picks, it's another opportunity for this hockey club to start the the retooling, rebuilding, re-whatevering, or something hybrid.
I would suspect that all the picks they have in those first couple of rounds in 2026 end up being human beings they draft. I'm more open to interpretation for what that 2027 second round pick is for the Vancouver Canucks. Is that a human they draft, or is that currency for future use to acquire a 22-year-old somebody?
Those picks are always currency, Blake. You know that as well as I do. It's currency now. You never know exactly what's happening. That the fact that the club now has multiple picks and they have an opportunity to start things. If there needs be a domino effect of finding a second round pick to use, then that's exactly what they'll do to get a warm body. And at a certain point, you're going to have to get bodies rather than picks. You're going to have to get guys to play the game and try to work things out in the long term. I think the bigger question now that Sherwood's done is who's next. That really is what the next story in Vancouver will be between now and the Olympic break, and then obviously at the trade deadline.
Yeah, John, there's a school of thought that because there's only 12 days between the end of the Olympic roster freeze and trade deadline, that some may get desperate and pay bigger prices in that window. Is it just too risky for the Canucks to keep holding on to Sherwood, who's already been injured, to try and see if you could squeeze every last ounce of juice by the deadline on the 6th?
I think this makes a ton more sense. And this has always been a Rutherford Alvin MO. Get ahead of the curve, do what you have to do, get a return that you think is fair in all of this, and then see what happens. So I don't think anybody should be opposed to this trade happening on this Monday, as opposed to waiting to a Monday in March.
Interesting. We've been asking since the lost Saturday night, a 10th in a row, what's most important at this stage? A win? Just one win. Break this streak, avoid franchise infamy. More losses to further secure last place and the best chance of picking number one overall, or trades and how they administer this trade build. What do you say? What do you think? What's most important for the Canucks as we stand here going into this Islanders game tonight?
Well, as much as you'd like to, see the team win a game or two, I think it's pretty pragmatic to suggest that what we're talking about is how to manage what happens at the draft in Buffalo at the end of June, and how to manage what the roster looks like when camp opens in September. Does winning really matter now? Seriously, and that's an awful thing to say, but does winning really matter when the team obviously has issues that they have to try to fix in order to try to, do something hybrid, whatever that hybrid is, so the answer is winning's nice, but in the end, with the way the situation has gone, and with what Jimmy's told people and what he told Gary Mason last week, I think that winning's not that important compared to everything else. It may resolve some of the pressure in the market, but in the end, I think that people are now looking at this and saying, okay, what can you do for me next year? And what will the roster look like next year? And how do we do it in such a manner that we don't have an adverse effect on our young talent? That would be my biggest concern if I'm sitting there and talking to the coaching staff and going through everything. Is it how does it affect a Carlson? How does it affect a Bouillon? Those are things that I think have to be measured in order to make sure that you are working in an environment that allows these guys to grow and, don't laugh, want to play in Vancouver. Because that's part of it too, is creating an environment that is positive on all aspects.
It's The only argument for winning right now would be to break up the monotony, I guess, a little bit. Put yourself back on the headlines.
Avoid the 13-game winless streak, the worst in franchise
And they
history.
built up this cushion now for the best odds in the draft lottery. They built up a cushion here. Now, I think in an ideal world, of which we do not live in, John, you'd win like every fifth game just to keep things interesting for the fan base just a little bit. It's I think that's where people are curious, John, is just when does the business side start to look at the owner and say, listen, we need a little help here. I know you guys are trying to quote unquote rebuild. And that whole dynamic is going to be interesting to watch and hear about.
The only thing I can reflect on in a similar scenario, Blake, this year was what the Winnipeg Jets went through when they lost, they were winless in 11.
Mm-hmm.
And they went into a Friday night game against the Los Angeles Kings and beat the Kings badly, 5-1. And by the third period, the fans were singing and they were doing the wave and having a blast. That there was a little bit of bright sunshine coming in through the windows for, albeit for a period and a half of hockey.
Yeah.
If it can make your fan base feel positive about it, then it's important. But you have to be practical. What does winning help you do right now? And quite frankly, it doesn't help you do as much as you want it to do, other than make your fans a little happy. But even that, there's going to be part of the fan base mad that you win.
Okay, how about
right?
Completely fair. No.
How about this question?
Right.
How about this question? Do you promote the young players, the Lekramakis of the world and others? So Elias Pettersson's down there right now as well.
He's back up.
It has been back there. Do you bring them up and expose them to the NHL, give them that experience, or do you protect them from the losing and bolster the AHL team who's also been at the bottom of the league as well? Like, what do you do with the kids? Play them in the NHL or shield them from the NHL?
Where will they develop best?
Probably a case-by-case
is
basis.
The best?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So where would the best structure for, whether it be an Elias Pettersson or a Victor Mancini or one of the young guys that's supposed to be part of the future, if there's more structure in the NHL and there is supposed to be more structure in the NHL, then put them on the big squad, put them here and give them an opportunity. But that will happen, I think, if some players need a ton of ice time, then go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it and move them back to Abbotsford and let's see what they can do there. And, I don't, but, and just as an aside, I don't care. The Calder Cup was nice. It was nice.
Yep.
I don't care about the American League Championship and wins and losses. It's a developmental league. It's to prepare people for the big show. And if you can prepare them better at this point on this season, playing for the Vancouver Canucks as opposed to the Abbotsford Canucks, then play them in Vancouver.
Yep. John, we're starting to hear more and more disappointment, dissatisfaction, anger with the management group here with the Vancouver Canucks. Do you have any reason to believe they may look to somebody else to rebuild this team, or do you think Rutherford and Alvin are safe through the deadline and through the rest of this season?
I think they're safe. I think that there's a strong relationship between ownership and this management team. There has been I don't think there's been any indication internally for sure that suggests that there's a lack of confidence in what Jim Rutherford and his group are trying to do now. Part of the issue in Vancouver, more so than anything, is the precipitous drop since the second round of the playoffs 2 years ago. It's not that they're bad now. It's how quickly it's happened. That's the amazing thing about this. And so what's to say that in that short period of time that Rutherford and Alvin and that group were in town, brought Rick Tocchet to town, and got them to a 7th game against the Edmonton Oilers? What's to say it can't happen again? I'm not towing a company line. I'm just saying, Jim Rutherford is known for this type of stuff. Tear it down, build it up, tear it down, build it up. That's part of his MO. And there's nothing to think, I think that, and there probably is somewhere on a piece of paper a pretty solid plan that he has that will work through all of this.
What did you make of his lukewarm commitment to the future, though, in staying in his seat?
I think when you get as to the age that Jim is at, I think you have to look at lots of things. You have to look at family. You have to look at challenges. And what I don't think is you don't want to put and back your owner into a corner. So in the end, the decision still will be the Aquilinis making the decision. But you don't want Jim Rutherford being bold and brash and saying, I'm here for the duration, just in case there's a decision made at a future date that surprises Rutherford and embarrasses everyone.
Yeah, I mean, he turned 77 in a few weeks, contractual status, plus also, what more do you want to do with your life? Those questions crystallize as you get to Jim's age. Moving on, how do you think Calgary did on the Rasmus Andersson deal, and what do you forecast for the Flames here going forward?
Well, I'm a huge Zach Whitecloud fan. I think he's a pretty good defenseman, a good solid D man. He certainly doesn't have the offensive skill that Andersson does, but Whitecloud will fit very well on that blue line for the Flames. And Craig Conroy was able to get another prospect, the kid out of Notre Dame or North Dakota rather, that's pretty good. So from that perspective, I think Craig did pretty well. In talking to people on both sides of it, that was actually their logic too, is that this is a trade that could help both teams at the right time. And from a Vegas perspective, this is typical Vegas. You guys have talked about it already with all the people. This is a typical Vegas move. No, there's no need to worry about a contract at this point. And George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon are confident that if they want to re-sign Rasmus Andersson, he will be under contract before June 30th. And they have every reason to believe that the culture they have created, the family they have created in Vegas, the lifestyle they have created for the players in Vegas, that Rasmus Andersson will sign there long term. By the way, you don't think that Rasmus Andersson will have had a long talk in the last few months with former teammate Noah Hannafin?
Of course they would.
How are things there? Of course. Just like it was, to me, it's similar to what it was same as the conversation that Sam Bennett and Matthew Tkachuk had about Florida.
Right. How's things there? What's the room like? What's the lifestyle like? How much more take-home pay do you have with no state income taxes?
I think the reputation speaks. There's a reputation.
There's absolutely a reputation there. They've done nothing but win since they got in the league.
And by the way, what time are you teeing off tomorrow?
That's right.
There's that too.
That's right. That's right. And we should also mention Abram Wiebe, the defenseman, is from Mission. In fact, spent 3+ years playing for the Chilliwack Chiefs in the BCHL.
Just saw him at the Spengler, yeah.
Absolutely. Lastly here, John, do you see a flurry activity before the Olympic roster freeze on February 4th?
I do. I do, simply because I think that, and maybe even quicker than that, maybe, as I said, even on the Sherwood situation this week, simply because I think people are trying to create opportunities for chemistry for guys so they have a better idea and indication exactly what they need by trade deadline. So get a player into your lineup, on your roster, play a few games. We'll go to the break, and then we'll make more evaluations that we have to, whether it works or not, and what more do they need. So the answer is, I think, yes, it's going to be advantageous for a few teams to be able to do it now, as opposed to that 2-week window when the games end at the last week of February.
Yeah, and forgive me, I had one other note here. Elias Pettersson, I was supposed to ask you, what are you hearing on Elias Pettersson?
Well, they're not shopping Pettersson. So they are not actively out there. They haven't put the shingle out and said Pettersson is available. But I can guarantee you that if somebody comes up with a great offer for Pettersson, it will be considered.
Do you think they've fielded calls on him already?
I don't know, Blake. It would be wrong for me to say yes, they have, or no, they haven't. But they are not out there doing with Pettersson what they have done with other players. And obviously when, the original email went out to the 31 teams, I don't think there was a contemplation that Pettersson was one of those guys that was supposed to be on that list. But I do think that if something came up and you looked at the offer and it made sense, then they would consider it.
How much do you think they're holding their nose, Canucks management, at the fact they have to consider, or they would like to, trade this many players that have trade protection? We've debated this on the show before, sort of what that does to a management's reputation, that you start to try to deal guys. In isolation, I don't think you think much of it. But, there's a bunch of guys here with trade protection that I think if they had their druthers, they would move on from.
Yeah. I don't think, honestly, I don't think that, they sit there and say, oh, boy, we're going to go back on our word to improve the hockey club. You come hell or just how do you improve this team so that, come next season, it's competitive. Mm-hmm. So as much as it's an issue from the collective bargaining agreement, from the word you gave your player, it doesn't matter. I mean, what you want to do is if you can go and find a way with trade protection, is the player gets to pick and choose where he wants to play. If you can do a deal with a team that's on that list, or if it's a full no move that they say, listen, we're compelled to move you. Where do you want to go? Then that's exactly what the whole concept of the trade protection was supposed to be. The player needed to be able to manage his future location, his career, and so it's still working. It's still doing its job. And it's not like the days of Matt Sundin in Toronto, and when Cliff Fletcher went to him and said, we're going to trade you. And he's, no, I'm not moving. I'm just not moving. And, that created a giant rift in that organization with Sundin for a long time.
Well, we've also been saying
I think there's more eyes wide open these days where players and representatives know it's about dictating where they go.
And as we've talked about, the project has changed for a lot of these players too. Like
that's it too.
They signed up for something different, and so they may be way more amenable than under normal circumstances. So.
Yep, and we shall see. And as John says, this could be quite an interesting week. Sir, thank you for the time. All the best. We'll catch up soon.
Cheers, boys.